If you're looking to level up your UX, content, or product design practice to confidently and joyfully tackle complexity, ask the million-dollar questions, and design digital systems that actually work, you are so in the right place. Welcome to the UX Level Up podcast. I'm Sophia Prater, and for over a decade, I've been teaching professionals how to make the most valuable and often invisible parts of UX gloriously visible. We will untangle the structure beneath the surface before jumping into screens, saving time, money, and headaches, and having so much fun doing it. Together, let's UX collaboration, break down silos, and build shared understanding that sets everyone up for success. Let's become the systems thinkers that our teams, and quite honestly, the world, are so desperately craving. Let's level up our practice and redefine what it means to be a UX designer. Let's jump into it. Hey y'all, welcome to the UX Level Up podcast. Today I have an amazing conversation with my good friend and content strategist and advanced OOUXer Karen Hewell. This is her second time on the podcast, and this conversation is just so juicy. We get into the work that she's been doing with government websites, how she is helping content creators within the government level up their practice and how they work. We talk about how to really get people on board with a new paradigm, a new way of thinking, and actually breaking down silos by divvying up responsibility by object instead of by page and by section, and getting these amazing, hardworking government employees to start thinking in systems, even though they've been trained for maybe even decades to think in pages and sections. So this is just such a practical conversation. Also, I think it's going to be really, really transformative for you. So I'm very excited to share it. Before we get into that, just a little public service announcement. We are opening up doors to cohort 11, the OOUX certification program. We will be opening up doors sometime in mid-August. We actually kick off. The week one of the certification is going to be September 8th of 2025. And that program runs for 10 weeks. So start blocking out your schedule, talking to your manager. If you need to get some budget for that, go to OOUX.com/certification to get all the details on the program. And of course, go to forum.OOUX.com if you have questions about the program too. If you just want to meet other OOUXers and ask about what the program is like, there's going to be so many friends just waiting for you there to talk about it. So you can also go there to learn more, but OOUX.com/certification is going to have all of the details for you. Now, this is a very rigorous program, okay? So if you are also wanting to see is OOUX right for me to do this kind of this level of commitment, and also if you want to do something to just prepare yourself and really lay some foundational groundwork, I really, really recommend going and checking out OOUX.com/foundations. This program is our accelerator program. It is going to get you dangerous with OOUX as soon as possible, getting you really understanding the discovery round of the ORCA process, how to do OOUX audits, how to collaborate with object-oriented UX and bring the team together. It is a program that is going to be so beneficial to do before the certification if you choose to take that route. So highly recommend checking out Foundations at OOUX.com/foundations. And if you want to get all the deets and get on the wait list for the certification, that's OOUX.com/certification. Okay, let's go talk to Karen. Welcome to the... Wait, no, I got to start again. I almost said the OOUX podcast. What is the name of my podcast again? The UX Level Up. Okay. Karen Hewell, welcome to the UX Level Up podcast. You are back. This is your second time on the podcast. It was called the OOUX podcast when you were here last time, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago. So welcome back.
100 years ago.
100 years ago.
Thank you. Yeah, feels 84 years ago. Yeah, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, lots happened since then, and happy to have you back. For those that don't know you, though, can you catch us up? People probably know you. We'll link to it in the show notes. Your last episode with us, your OOUX happy hour, the infamous OOUX happy hour on NavFlows. Basically NavFlows on steroids. But you are here to talk to us today about some work that you've been doing in government. Yeah, some content governance work and how OOUX is helping out. But can you give us a little bit of an update on you, what you've been doing, who you are, your OOUX background, all that good stuff?
Yep. So I got certified an advanced certificate in OUX, about 2-3 years ago, I think. And since then.
Yeah, you were cohort 9. You were the first
Cohort 9. Yep.
Yeah, the first cohort of the advanced certification.
Of the advances. Yeah. So after that, I am still a content strategist, still an information architect, but I moved to a new consultancy called Anthrotech, and we work mainly with government and nonprofit agencies, but we kind of work with everyone these days, but we focus on human-centered design. So we're a human-centered design consultancy, and I focus on all the structure and the information architecture for a lot of websites for government agencies and nonprofits that traditionally really struggle with having really interactive and interesting website experiences. So that's what I'm doing these days. And I'm doing a lot of work in not just the design of the content experience and the design of the information architecture, but also training people how to manage it and how to govern all that information over time, which is a whole other beast beyond just design. It's a very different kind of design work.
Yeah. So tell us, like, when you came into some of your recent clients, like, what kind of problems were you seeing? Like, what was going wrong when it comes to content governance and, like, getting people to stuff and update it in the right place? Like, what kind of issues were you seeing?
Well, I think when you work with government agencies, by the time they finally manage to secure a budget to be able to update a website, that website that they're updating is usually about 5 to 10 years out of date. So often you're dealing with an enormous amount of legacy information and legacy processes and structure in the organization itself. These agencies are full of really, really hardworking people that are trying to do 5 people's jobs with one person. And so often their work is really, really complex. They're doing so many different things, and only one tiny, tiny fraction of that is actually managing the website. So what ends up happening is you have many, many people trying to work together to manage this massive website as best they can. But over time, you can imagine if it's not set up correctly, there's lots of stuff that needs to be cleaned up when you get to the point of a redesign. So a lot of times what we see is a lot of exhaustion. Even before we start the redesign, they're already tired. So by the time we're talking about how do you manage this brand new experience, that can be quite a lift because they have to relearn how to do something alongside the work that they're already doing. So it's been an interesting challenge working with these folks.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And what are the things exactly that you're trying to avoid within the user experience? So, like, that's the internal side of it, of people just being exhausted. They have, like, and I dealt with that when I was working with the National Park Service, where it was like the people updating the website a lot of the time were like the park rangers,
100%,
not
yeah.
web people, right? That's not really their job, but it's also their job because their job is freaking everything. So they're already stretched so thin, and then it's like this new system, and then like a new thing that they have to learn, and it's going to work a different way. And it's kind of like, if you're moving over to maybe in an OUX way of doing it, it could be like kind of a paradigm shift for them. But like, when we're moving over to this new way of doing things, which we'll definitely be getting into, what are the things that we want to avoid in the site and in the user experience that are happening when you have folks that are spread really thin, updating things and just trying to get it as accurate as possible?
So traditionally, what I have seen is that a lot of these websites are kind of split up essentially by section. So when you have teams that are managing a website collectively, like you have different teams that are managing different portions of the information, the easiest way to split that up is by site section or a chunk of pages in a particular part of the site. So it kind of becomes this delineation of, okay, this team manages this section of the site, this team manages this section of the site, and never the twain shall meet. And so essentially you have this website that is just as siloed as the departments within the organization, which makes a lot of sense, except that when someone is actually interacting with the agency, most of the time they're interacting with more than just one department. They're actually interacting with multiple when they're trying to get something done. So what it creates is this very siloed experience with very little crossover. So your users can't see the connection between things, and often they see a lot of redundant information and a lot of really outdated information because one team might not know something changed in another department, and they might have information about on their section of the site. So all of a sudden you have sections of the site that are saying two different things. And you can imagine that when you're going on a government site and you're seeing that kind of inconsistency, that can be a little nerve-wracking for someone who's trying to find reliable information about how to do something, what the law says about something, requirements related to something. And that's often what's covered by these websites. Yeah. So much of the time, we're not only trying to de-silo the information, but we're also trying to consolidate it in a way where the user is able to find the right information, the correct up-to-date information in one place, versus trying to find it piecemeal across an entire site.
Yeah. And then if they go find it in a different place, then it's the same information. And and so that's like a consistency thing for the user. And also, I'm guessing, like a having to update one thing in multiple places issue for the content creators, where it's the same, like, what day are we closed? Are we closed on Thanksgiving or not? Or something like that. Like, it lives like 16
What's the status
places
of this project? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen, or like I know that I've seen it in my work, like all the little workarounds that content creators sometimes have for websites like this. Like, they have their little sticky note, or they have their little notepad of like, okay, this one thing, like, you got to go here, you got to go here, you got to go here, and here's how you need to update it. And like, it takes probably, 10 times as long as it needs to take. And you're opening yourself up to a lot of human error too in getting those inconsistencies. So what happened with OOUX? How'd you bring some OOUX in? How'd that go?
It's not always shifting an organization to a new way of thinking is a challenge, right? Mm-hmm. But I think one of the best things about OOUX, and the reason that I've loved using it for helping agencies understand how to manage a site better, is that instead of them thinking about things in pages, we start thinking about things in ideas or concepts. Normally, when I'm working with an agency, a department will kind of understand when I say, okay, what is it that you're working on? Well, we're working on these projects. Oh, well, we manage this service, and we have multiple online services. So even just in talking to them, you start to hear the nouns that they're used to working with. And so it's been really interesting using that information that they're saying out loud and starting to model it right in front of them. The agency that I work with, we do a lot of really hand-in-hand consultation. We're working with them as we're helping them understand these things. So using OOUX as a way to help them see how everything in their organization is connected has been a game changer. Because often what they're used to seeing is they only see things when they're done, they're designed, they're on a page, and they don't see how it all connects. Being able to show them the back end, show them the inner workings of the system that we're creating with them, makes it feel like they're part of that redesign process. So they're not just learning how to use a website when we hand it to them. Hey, here's your new website, learn how to use it. They're actually learning how to use it through the process of designing it, because OOUX gives me a way to have them design it with me. They're telling me what's going on at their organization, and I'm mapping it in a way that they can actually see. It's been a game changer for them, because I think that they understand the idea of, we manage this thing. We're a policy team. We manage a rule. We're a project team. We manage project statuses. Those things really make sense to their mental model. And so it makes it much easier for them to understand how those things would be connected across a site. And when you're moving agencies that are used to using like very legacy website systems like CMSs that have just pages into things like Drupal, which is what we use, our CMS that we often use when we build, those are very content type based. So it makes it much easier by the time you actually get them creating their content in the back end of the site. They already know what a content type is, because they're like, oh, I know what those are. Those are objects. I understand what those are called and why there's so many instances of them. So it makes it much easier to bring them along on the process versus throwing them in the deep end by the time you get them to the actual redesign and you're training them how to use the system.
And what you're really talking about here is you're talking about co-creation. And, we love to talk about collaboration in the object-oriented UX world and like how much it helps us collaborate with our developers or our business partners, but it helps you collaborate with your users too. Like, you can bring them into this process, and it's so freaking cool because they're learning to use the system like while they're teaching you what their mental model is. So, and then you're mapping it out, and together you're like, here is this system of concepts, and it's planting all these seeds for them. They're like, oh yes, that is my system of concepts. And it also is going to become easier to use just naturally because it's mimicking their mental model of how their things connect to each other. I have to give a shout out. I have to maybe get you in touch. We've got somebody in cohort 11 already pre-enrolled in the early bird. We did a little early bird enrollment who works at Drupal and is trying to OOUX Drupal. So shout out to Ralph. And hey Ralph, if you're listening. So if you've been using a lot of Drupal, it'll be fun to have him in cohort 11, and he's doing all the meta stuff of being like, oh wait, attribute is an object. If you're trying to like OOUX Drupal, it's a whole other layer, whole other conversation.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that fun stuff. Okay, cool. So when it comes to working with them and like doing this co-creation work, what kind of like questions have you been able to ask? Like what kind of things have come up of like kind of wrangling all that complexity and figuring out what is their mental model? How do they think about this stuff?
I think one of the biggest things that we've been able to do is be able to understand what something is. And I know that sounds a little silly, but one of the big things that we do with our users and even with our internal partners that we work with are card sorts. And card sorts can be really cool because they start to give us an idea of what the instances of a thing are. And you'd be surprised how murky it is, what a service is versus a project versus a program. But what we start to find in most of these websites, especially if they're like a .gov website, is that they have a lot of the same objects. Service, project, program. These are things that come up over and over and over again. And so often when you go on a website that's talking about these things, they don't actually call it those things, or they have very inconsistent titles for pages. And so it's very difficult for the user to understand like what they're looking at. So being able to instantiate things like saying, okay, here's the name of all these projects, here's the name of all these programs, here's the name of all these services that we've gathered from noun foraging, putting that in front of a user group, internal or external, and then seeing how they group those things together, you get to ask questions like, wait, this is called a project, but you're telling me it's a little bit more like these programs. Do we need to name that something different? Does that need to be moved to a different portion of the site? So you start to get feedback of understanding how even if our mental model doesn't say that something is part of a category, your users are going to go to that area looking for that information. So it starts to give us an understanding of like, what do these words mean to our users, and how is that different from how government agencies are talking about it? So I found that it's really helped streamline things internally more than it has externally. Our end users tend to know what they're looking for very much, but internally they're calling it 12 different things, and they get so caught up in the complexities of it of, well, actually technically that's a project and that's managed by this team. By being able to simplify that and say, look, your users don't really care. This is what they think it is. That's why it needs to be in this section. It helps them get rid of some of that jargon that ends up feeling like you're not really talking to your users, you're talking at them. I do a lot of work about shifting content of websites into plain language. And shifting stuff into plain language means you actually need to know what you're talking about. You know what you're describing. Yeah. Because if you don't know what you're describing, you're going to be using all these words that don't really mean anything. So being able to call something clear, it is a program, this is what a program is, makes the plain language work so much easier because we've already defined what that thing is. So it's much easier to talk about it and how it's related to other things. It makes it a lot easier, I think, to get rid of that jargon and to make it make sense not only to the end user, but it still be true to what information we're trying to convey for the agency. And that can be a little scary, moving from technical government language that's usually very legally specific, moving that into more plain language can be scary. So that work of making sure that we're saying the right thing is huge.
Yeah, totally. I want to go back to something we were talking about a few minutes ago about getting people on board with this, right? And getting people to like understand it, and that it is like this sort of a paradigm shift. You mentioned when we were like just chit-chatting beforehand using the cookie cutter analogy.
Yeah.
Can you tell me like how that, Like first when they're like, I have been working in sections and pages for the last 25 years on this old CMS site, all based in pages. And now you're coming in here with these newfangled concepts. How do you help them like move over into this new way of thinking that is actually easier and more natural? They've just been so harshly trained on sections and pages and these kind of like container things instead of the actual things. How do you help them make that transition?
Metaphor. And I think it can take a little bit of time to get that kind of trust with the client to be able to use these types of metaphors to help explain things. But honestly, it makes such a difference. So my last client, I was working with the wonderful folks at the Washington Office of the Insurance Commissioner. They recently relaunched a brand new website, and we used OOUX to model a huge portion of that site. And one of the ways that I helped describe it to them early on in the process was this concept of cookie cutters. So I showed them a picture of a batch of cookies, and I said, okay, what do all these have in common? We were brainstorming, well, they all have the color red on them. They're all these different Christmas themes. There's different shapes, but they all have similar colors. And I said, okay, so let's look at how these cookies are made. And we took a look at the cookie cutters. So what I explained is every type of content, every content type, or in this case, noun, is basically a cookie cutter, right? So that noun is going to make multiple cookies that are the same shape, but those might all have different color frosting on them or a different design on them.
So you have a program cookie cutter, you have a project cookie cutter, you've got a service cookie cutter.
Service cookie cutter, exactly. And then each of those will have their own frosting on them. So they can be the same shape, but they're a little different from one another. And when you put all of those together, you have a batch of Christmas cookies. Mm-hmm. But if you have them separately, they're their own thing, like a Santa, a Christmas tree, a star. But you put it all together, they all have coordinating colors, they have different shapes, but they tell a story together. Mm-hmm. And so it's much easier for people to understand, okay, the content type is the cookie cutter, the page, the actual detail page, is the cookie, and that's where you put the frosting. Yeah. That clicked. People really understand that.
Yeah, so for those of you out there who are having trouble like getting your team, getting your clients to understand this concept of OOUX, our cookie cutter and cookie analogy is very, very helpful. Thinking about like, okay, we want to create a bunch of cookie cutters. We want to be really efficient when we create all of our instances, our cookies, and giving examples too. So saying like we have our service cookie cutter and it's going to stamp out road services and, you know, water services or something like that. So you're starting to list some of those cookies or instances. Are really helpful. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I got the impression when we were chatting earlier that like the way that the team, like how you're breaking down these silos, instead of it being like, you're responsible for this section and you're responsible for this section and here's our org chart as our navigation. Instead of doing that, actually saying you're responsible for this object or concept and you're responsible for this object or concept. Okay, you're nodding your head. Tell me more about this, because this is something I've been thinking about for years now of like, what kind of effectiveness could we experience from dividing our team by object or groups of objects, and then baking in the collaboration too, based on the relationships of the objects. Tell me more.
Exactly. So like, let's say something that I see a lot is that we have one team that they're handling road projects. And then we have another team that is handling road services. So when you go on a website, you're going to go to the service page. Let's say road services. Okay, it's road maintenance is the service page. You're learning all about road maintenance. Maybe you've got a call to action where you can submit feedback on road maintenance. Maybe you want to report an accident, things like that. But as you scroll down the page, it's likely that you're going to get to a section that's all about road projects. Those are not the service, right? Those are individual projects related to road services. So it's like an update on a highway or they're adding a median to this part of the road. All of those things, guess what? Those are not managed by the same people that are managing the road services page. Those are managed by specific project teams that are on the ground managing that project on a daily basis. So that service page, that's maybe being updated maybe once a quarter, maybe once a year, probably not super often. but those projects within them, those should be updated probably sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, very, very regularly. Historically, what would happen is that services page would have a list of projects that were written in, and every time something changed, not only would the project page over on this other side of the site have to be updated, but then they'd have to go over to this other services page and manually update each of those instances.
Yeah.
Which, guess what, wouldn't happen most of the time, so you would have inconsistent information.
Right.
So by taking that out of the equation and saying, you know what, if you create a connection between service and project is managed by the people who know what's going on with the project, and the service is managed by people who are managing the messaging around a service, and you connect them and have a card of each of those in there, then you start to be able to communicate things like the status of that project, the location of that project right within a card. And then they can manage that whole detail page. They're just managing in one place. They're going to one content type that's called project, and it's I-90 update, and they're updating the status there, and they're adding dates of when things were changed. And that service page doesn't have to change at all. Just that card within it already shows that updated status, and there doesn't need to be duplicative efforts to update that information in multiple parts of the site. Because guess what? They probably don't even know it's on that part of the site.
No.
Because they're not talking to each other.
Right.
So then by even having those things together on that single page, then that other team can start to see those changes happening on the front end of the site. Not only does it help users know what's going on with the projects, it also helps the internal team know what's going on with the projects, because they're using the website too to understand what's going on. So it becomes a tool for communication, actually becomes a system versus a billboard in the desert in which people desperately try to keep up to date with all of the things that are changing at the agency.
This is like, I think this is such an important thing for everybody to hear and a massive takeaway. So talking to y'all listening, can you think about, especially those that are in management and leadership, think about how your team is siloed. Like, is it by something like platform or part of the site or flow or feature, right? Those are really difficult ways to kind of divide people's responsibility up. And there's just such a paradox here that like actually making the dividing lines nice and clear between object actually promotes collaboration. Right? Instead of saying, oh, you have the services page and my project is embedded on the services page. So if I want it updated, I have to go talk to the people in the services, which just doesn't happen. But instead, like, I don't have to talk to them. Actually, I can just update it and it updates. But now the update has been communicated. So it's this weird paradox or thing, something that you like, you're actually dividing teams more clearly, but then it breaks down silos because those objects are connected to each other.
And it saves time because these folks only have time to make that update one time. The email volleys that they're sending back and forth to try and stay up to date with everything that's going on is overwhelming for them. And so I think it also makes it much easier for them to only have to worry about doing something one time in one place, and it's updated everywhere. That's huge because I think that these folks have a really hard time fitting into what they're doing on a daily basis. Adding a website, managing a website on top of that is a lot. So if you're saving them 2 or 3 steps in a process, even just 5 minutes, if they have to do that 60 times a week, you're saving them a day of work of not having to do that on the website, because that's not their main job, right? That's just part of the communication that they need to do as part of their role. They need to communicate with the public. So it not only saves time, but it also saves that mental capacity that these folks have to manage because they're trying to keep track of a million things in their head. Being able to use the website as it's intended, which is a communication, a status update of things, is much, much easier for everyone.
OOUX does not just level us up as practitioners, it helps our clients level up, like the content creators, because then, yes, their brain space is freed up, right, to do the more important things and update the same thing in like 20 different places. And then the users are going to get the more accurate information. They're going to get like way less redundancies, or maybe like zero redundancies if things are only in one place, and then it gets propagated beautifully as designed. They're not going to get those inconsistencies. They're not going to see like the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing, and like have that kind of also that sinking feeling of like, what is going on with my government? Like, this is not consistent. What are my tax dollars going to? But they actually are getting their information faster, and they're getting what they need more quickly
which has such
Correct.
a trickle down effect of like government websites being able to, just people on those websites with less time. It's soaking up less energy. There's so many reasons to get people in and out and get,
Yeah.
so they have the information they need.
Plus, like in Drupal, one of the cool things about Drupal and a lot of CMS is that you can assign owners to specific content types. That means that if you have turnover, which you will, you're going to have new people stepping into roles. It makes it much easier to figure out who the new owner of that object is, of that instance is, because you can assign a person to it. So it also makes handover, just managing internal teams as you're changing things around over the course of a website that's going to last for usually a lot longer than the tenure of the people that work there. It means that things don't just get dropped when someone leaves. They're not keeping in their mind, where's all the places on the website this information is stored. That's already done for them. It's connected to this one object that's assigned to them in the CMS. It's part of their to-do list already. So it also helps save some of that, the inconsistency that comes up in over time where websites tend to degrade. OOUX helps those websites not degrade over time because it connects all the relevant information to one place. It makes it much easier to manage over time.
Yeah, because that is also based on a mental model or conceptual model that changes very slowly, if at all, right? Like this is programs and projects. It probably was the same like 100 years ago, right? So it'd
Correct.
likely be the same 100 years from now. I want to go back to like I have too many questions, Karen. Okay, so we're gonna talk about cadence, but I want to talk first about the permissions thing. So being able to assign objects to different people, and then I heard you say instance too. So do you get that like this person manages the service object, or is it like this person manages these 3 service instances? Or both.
Either or.
Yeah,
You can do either. That's what's so cool.
That
is that
cool.
you can say, hey, maybe somebody manages all the instances of service. Maybe they're managing all of those. But in most cases, you've got maybe one person who manages all the services, but then they have particular contributors that are assigned to a subset of those services. So the great thing about Drupal and the great thing is about permissions in these systems is that you can kind of have that tiered scaffold way of organizing information. So you have someone who might manage pages over a group of pages, and then they have contributors that are handling a set of instances within that. So you can have people that are just contributing content but maybe can't publish it. They can submit it for review by somebody who manages all of the pages. So there's so many different ways that you can organize and engineer it. Just like we're designing on the front end for the user that's consuming the information, we're also able to kind of design the experience on the back end as well. Because we can use those exact same objects but create things like dashboards, to-do lists. We can create email updates when a new content type is updated or needs to be updated. There's all these different things that you can do in the back end to also make it easier for the managers, the people that are managing the content, to actually create and manage all those content types as well, with all those different ways that you can map in permissions, which I know is part of the OOUX masterclass is understanding how permissions fit in. And guess what? It does come up. It's huge what you can do with CMSs. Once you start thinking of things in objects, you can make it much, much easier to manage those in a way that feels more like a dashboard versus, oh God, I have to parse through all of these different pages and figure out which ones are my responsibility.
Yeah, permissions by page or section, like, that just seems like I can barely wrap my head around it or imagine it, how that would even work. And doing it by object and object instances or groups of instances, like this is why, like, not only for like a content creation system that you're working on, but also if you're designing an app or something and there's permissions involved, you can really think about the permissions around objects and instances of objects, which is a beautiful thing. Shout out to Rebecca Wall, who is working on that. So she's actually going to be giving a session in our VIP track. We're doing a VIP track this year. So people can come back, or people that are doing the certification can upgrade to the VIP track. There's just going to be some extra sessions and talks. And Rebecca Wall is going to be doing one on how she's been applying OOUXifying permissions. So very exciting, very excited. So let's actually transition. Is there anything else you want to say that you haven't gotten to say? Because I do want to transition to talking about a little bit about the certification and your experience. Or is there anything else?
Yeah, the only other thing that I would want to maybe speak to is the cadence.
Oh yeah,
so,
I wrote that down and we talked about,
Yep. Yeah, and that really matters because let's say this is common. If somebody is in charge of multiple pages, like let's say, or multiple instances or multiple content types, there is many times some of those content types need to be updated on a very regular basis. Project, for example. Sometimes people are checking those and updating them every single day. But then they might also have pages that they only look at maybe once or twice a year. So being able to also map cadence as well as owner, like how often do you need to update this, helps them manage and feed it into their overall to-do list, their overall plan, so that instead of being like, oh gosh, I have to review this whole section of the site without a really clear direction of where to go, you can say, no, you only look at these instances at this time, you look at these instances at this time. You can literally put it on a calendar.
Yes.
Which is a huge deal for someone who's managing 100 tasks every day and only 2 of them are related to the website. Being able to put that stuff on a website, you're checking these instances, these content types at this frequency, not only helps you build it into a governance plan so that the whole team is working together, we know when things are being updated, but it makes it easier for an individual person to manage their part in that because they have a cadence, they have a structure that they can follow as well.
So good. Yes, 100%. I have a little bit of this in foundations, in OOUX foundations. We have a mini workshop, like a guided workshop on applying OOUX to your portfolio. And so you're your own, of course, content creator in that, right? As it should be. So thinking about just create, update, and delete, thinking about the cadence of those. Like how often are you creating new instances of a certification or something? How often are you creating new instances of a project? How often do you need to go in there and update your projects or like even actually delete some things? And so you could actually look at create, update, delete by all of your objects. Like imagine a matrix. For those that are listening, create, update, delete, and then all your objects, and you can start brainstorming what your strategy is for creation, updating, and deleting for each of your objects.
You just described a content governance workshop. Look at that.
Wow.
That's exactly what that is.
OOUXified. Okay, and I want to look back to one other thing, and that is this idea that you sort of touched on earlier in our conversation about how working in government, working in this sector, you're starting to see the same objects come up over and over and over again. Like I think you mentioned it helps you get to the customization. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
As it turns out, when you start to look at government websites or any .gov, and I know I keep saying government websites, it's really anyone in the public sector, but any website in the public sector, if you really look at them, we might be calling things different things, but guess what? 90% of the time, it's the same objects that show up from one website to another to another. And so one of the things that I've really loved about OOUX, and I think it's kind of my superpower, is because I can come into a conversation already understanding exactly what a program is conceptually. I know what a service is conceptually. I know what a project is conceptually. I know what a rule is conceptually, which is a big deal because I was not familiar with the rulemaking process before I started this job. So I can come in and say, look, I already kind of understand what this is shaped like. And it makes it much easier to take that base shape, that kind of starting point, and customize it in a way that really makes sense for that agency. So we're able to get to really getting to know them so much faster because we can skip the small talk. We know how this basic thing is shaped. Let's talk about how to make it shaped and sound like you as an agency. Being able to bring voice and tone into an agency system is huge. Like, for example, we might have a project in one agency and a project in another agency. There's a good chance that both of them are going to have a status tag. Those status labels might be not started, in progress, completed, whereas the status might be very specific, phase 1 begun, phase 2 pending, phase 3. There's different ways that they talk about status, or they might have different descriptions. One might have just a general description for the project. One might have specific project phases that they want to describe, so it might be these child objects within it. But it really helps us get to that point a lot faster because we already kind of know what the basic shape is, and then we get to customize and reshape it versus starting from scratch every time. It saves us time, it saves them time, and it makes me feel like a genius going into these conversations, feeling like I already know what it's shaped like, and they immediately feel like we're on their side. We're there to help them because we already kind of know what the system is shaped like.
That is so, like, you think about leveling up with OOUX. And one way is just like you can onboard yourself to a new domain so quickly, right? Like, and so and I grew up in my UX career as a consultant, constantly dropped into like completely new domains. So OOUX was my coping mechanism of like, okay, how do I like get up to speed to this so fast? But then the other side of this is if you do stay in a domain, whether you're staying in one company or you're like specializing in a certain domain, specializing in medical, specializing in government, specializing in ed tech or something, then you get this baseline understanding. You really do become the subject matter expert. And then you can get to the nuance between the different clients so much faster because you have this foundation of a conceptual model and how all these things fit together. It's so cool.
And you're able to repeat things back to people or document it in a way where as they're saying it, they're seeing it take shape in front of them. And it makes them feel heard. These folks are so used to feeling like they're talking over people's heads. When you are able to really look at them and say, no, I understand how this thing is shaped and what you're trying to do with it, it can be really transformative. You feel like a partner then, which is very different from just a consultant.
Oh my gosh, it's got to be like night and day. I can imagine just having so many other web tech people coming in. They don't understand the domain at all. And then you all come in and you've already just hit the ground running and they feel so heard. And then you can just, again, like you kind of can cut the small talk. You can go straight into the nuance and probably ask like really amazing questions. Also because you know how these other systems have worked. So you're like, do y'all do it this way or do you do it this way? Yeah.
And those developers love it because you can start with those base objects and they can start to customize from there so they can be more efficient with their time. They can troubleshoot and build really strong base objects that operate really well on their own, so you can bring a lot more complexity and interactivity to websites that traditionally wouldn't be able to have that because it's not cost effective. Now you can make interactivity and really dynamic experiences cost effective because you're not reinventing the wheel every time.
Oh my gosh. Drop the mic. Amazing. So you got certified. What was it? Cohort 5?
I think
don't know.
5 or 6. And then I was a mentor for 7. So yeah, it must have been way back in 5.
It must way back in 5.
Ready to recertify soon.
Oh my gosh. Well, you'll get to recertify as an advancee. You'll just need to do that like we're saying every 3 years. So probably next year you'll want to come back to do the advanced program and come back and mentor. Okay, so we are going to be opening up doors to cohort 11 soon. Probably it's like mid-August. So tell me about when you decided to enroll in this program. If you can like go back in time.
Oh, yes. What a traumatic time in my life. Interestingly, I came into OOUX because I was working for a large educational company that had a huge digital domain. I was on board with them as part of their global design team when they did a reorg, which meant that more than half of my team vanished in this span of maybe 3 or 4 months, which meant I suddenly was doing the work of about 5 people and I was managing an enormous amount of information. And I had to take 4 months of FMLA shortly after that job because I was so burnt out. And so when I started OOUX, it was truly my lifeline of how do I not let this happen again? I don't exactly know what needs to happen, but if it means managing complexity, that's exactly what I need. And I will tell you that OOUX, I think, is my way of managing burnout and still enjoying my job because I'm not overthinking everything. I'm able to stay calm because I already know kind of the shape of things. I know that there's a process for uncovering that complexity. And the masterclass also gave me an opportunity to work with others and learn so much from how they were thinking about it too. So it was game-changing for me because it gave me a set of tools that helped me be very strategic but also very nimble at work. I can apply OOUX to virtually everything that I do. It's kind of the joke at my job. I can make OOUX work for everything. But it's true. You can really apply this way of thinking into anything that needs structured thinking. And a lot of UX thinking is structured thinking, taking nebulous concepts and turning it into something highly structured that you can code. That work is usually done through trial and error, right? Not having to work in trial and error makes me feel less overwhelmed by whether or not I'm going in the right direction. I know I'm going in the right direction. I'm just chipping away at things over time. It also makes me a much better partner. So I tell everyone, I'm sure that I'll be sending this podcast to a few folks that I've been talking to about OOUX to encourage them to be part of the master class, because in a course of, how long is the course? It's what?
10 weeks.
8 weeks?
10 weeks.
It's 10 weeks that feels like 4 years of UX education, because it takes the foundation, the fundamentals, and it gives you this massive toolkit of different things that you can do. You don't have to do the entire process, but I have used bits and pieces of the whole process to get at specific problems at work. It's like any project that I'm up against, I know I can look at the whole OOUXer process and probably pick out about half of those exercises that would be really useful.
Amazing. That's so cool. I love hearing all of that.
And I go back to the course all the time to remember, how did this thing work? And I get to go back to the course.
We're about to move your cheese. We're about to move your cheese.
No,
the whole thing is getting refilmed. Can you believe it? The whole
it's kind of exciting
thing.
though.
It's going to be rolling out during cohort 11. So if you are in the masterclass, don't worry. We're not going to take it away from you. We'll have both versions for at least a while. So if you're like in the middle of the old version, but yeah, major updates are coming to just like clean it up. I mean, it's going to be all the same stuff, just even tighter. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exciting.
It's exciting.
Yeah, I really like especially how you were saying how it helps. It's like your antidote to burnout, because like for me, I feel the same way, and I hear that over and over again, because you're expanding your capacity for complexity. So you can actually take in more complexity, and then you're having fun with it because you have these tools. So like the thing is I feel what happens to people that these are the type of people that love complexity, right? We're kind of like masochists for it. So it's people that end up in enterprise level situations or highly complex domains, but then it's like they were never really given like awesome tools to manage that complexity. So it's like we all want to. It's not like I don't want things to be complicated. Let's just simplify this, or let me, throw the complexity out the window. It's like, no, I really want to be able to tackle it, but I just need better tools. And this is just a better tool set for tackling it. And then it becomes so much more fun, right? When you have good tools. Like nothing is fun when you have crap tools. Any craft that you're doing, and if your tools are like dull and like broken or something like that, or from like 400 years ago, you upgrade your tools, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this craft all of a sudden becomes so much more fun.
Yeah, everyone knows what it's like cutting or cooking with a set of knives that are super dull and won't even cut into a tomato.
Like
it's a nightmare.
Cooking at an Airbnb. It's like going from cooking at an Airbnb with all the nonstick is gone, or all the knives are dull, to a chef's kitchen. You still are a smart UX designer. All of a sudden now you just have sharper freaking knives and a nonstick pan.
And it deactivates fear. And I think we talked about it in the last podcast, which is a very different theme.
Yeah.
But it really deactivates fear. The moment you have tools, a way to move forward, it deactivates fear, which means that you can be curious. Same thing happens for anyone who's ever been to therapy. The reason that couples therapy and even personal therapy can be very helpful is because it gives you a set of tools. Does it change what's in front of you? No, it doesn't change the problem. It doesn't make it go away. It just gives you a way to get at it. So instead of being frozen saying, I don't know what to do, you can get curious about what's going on, and you can get in there and start to chip away at it. So it's very similar in that way. I think it makes things feel like you don't have to answer every question right away. You can answer them in the right order, which is huge.
Yeah. And what you were saying, like you're chipping away at it, not doing a bunch of trial and error, which is like, yes, we want to run experiments, but we want to run really intentional experiments, right? Like we want to be strategic about the experiments that we're doing and not just throwing shit at the wall to see what happens. And it takes you out of that trial and error, which can be incredibly stressful. And then you just like...
For you and the client.
Yeah, for everybody. So for the folks out there that are like, should I get on this wait list for the certification? Should I check this out? Should I do this big thing? Because it is a big thing, right? It's 10 weeks and it is kind of like a part-time job for 10 weeks. Very, very transformative. But if somebody's hesitating, what would you say to them? They're not so sure.
Oh, I think that I would say to you that this will be the best money you have spent, not just for transforming the way that you work and making your job better, but it's going to make you feel more capable. It's going to open up space in your brain because you'll be able to enjoy being curious about problems again at work, which I think that if there's anything that you can do for yourself, it's creating ways to not have to feel like all of your energy goes into your job. We have hard jobs. If you're a UX designer, you have a hard job. If you're anything like me, you're thinking about your job even when you're not working because you're trying to work out problems. This has really given me a way to be able to chip away at that in a way that feels really exciting. So when I am spinning on problems at home and I'm cooking and I'm thinking about how I'm going to model that thing, I'm being curious about it. It makes me feel lighter. Honestly, I know that it was great for my career. It was also great for my mental health. And so if you're on the fence and you're thinking like, oh man, I'm really struggling with burnout. Oh, I don't know if it's worth all that time and energy. 10 weeks to give yourself mental clarity for years afterward, 10 weeks ain't nothing. It's going to open up a whole new way of thinking and put you in a different direction. So I'd say go for it. Get ready to have your mind twisted around. But once it clicks, once you see the matrix, you can't unsee it, and it's going to change the way that you work.
Wow, beautiful. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Correct.
Karen, where can people find you? Let us know a little bit about Anthrotech. And I think that Anthrotech is doing some cool things in education too, and has some accessibility stuff going on. What's going on with?
Oh yeah, we've got lots of cool stuff with digital accessibility. We're doing a lot of really cool projects with for-profit and nonprofit as well. We do a lot of work with public sector clients, but really we're really interested in anyone who wants to get involved in human-centered design. We have an exceptional research team. We're really able to get in tune with what users really need, really in-depth research. So yeah, Anthrotech, we're based in Seattle. We work with agencies and organizations all over the country as well as around the world. And you can find me at anthro-tech.com. I'm one of just a few content strategists that works with this awesome team. And yeah, come find us over there. And you can also find me on LinkedIn at Karen Hewell. Please go find me there, connect, ask me questions about OOUX, about Anthrotech. Happy to chat.
Awesome. I will put those links in the show notes. Karen, thank you so much for coming on. It was very enlightening and really, really inspiring. I'm really excited to share this conversation with everybody.
Thank you. I'm glad that we can get the word out about this. Yeah. Save everyone some burnout.
Woo, woo. Happy OOUXing, everybody. I hope y'all really enjoyed that conversation with Karen and that you are inspired to get certified this year. If you want to learn more, go to OOUX.com/certification to get all the details, get on the wait list, and depending on when you're listening to this, maybe actually go ahead and enroll. We will be opening up doors sometime in mid-August of 2025, and we will be kicking off on September 8th and going for 10 glorious weeks. Like Karen said, it is 10 weeks that feels like 4 years of UX education, and it will be the gift that keeps on giving, all right? Maybe even actually help you with burnout in your mental health, not only the health of your career. So what a win-win. Come on in. We can't wait to spend some time with you and get to know you in the certification. So OOUX.com/certification. Hope to see you there. Thank you so much for listening to the UX Level Up podcast. If you want to connect with me, Sophia, please follow me on Instagram at SophiaVUX, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sophia Prater. I'm pretty easy to find there. Our music was brought to you by Ruby Vel, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Thanks again for listening.